Hello and good afternoon. This is Scott Abels. I am the co-founder and president of Prepjet, and I want to welcome you to this week's podcast. I wrote down some topics, and I know Ethan is with me here. He has questions from our Facebook group, which I will address. But I made some notes because of some recent conversations I've had with some of my applicants and applicants that I work with in our premium program, as well as some other applicants in the basic and the plus. Everything I'm going to share with you in the time I have applies to anybody using any other program besides Prepjet, because I really feel very strongly that, for instance, in clinical psychology, I want all of you to pay close attention to any material you have as it pertains to cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, cross-cultural issues, which everybody struggles with, continues to be a problem, as well as identity development models, and family therapies, because there are several that you may not be familiar with, and you'll need to know them for the EPPP. In terms of org psych, I want to emphasize this again. Most of you didn't take any org courses, and yet org is moderately weighted. It's not as weighted, for instance, as clinical or ethics or psychopathology, but it's really close. Remember that org psych, you need to stop thinking like a therapist, and I want you to think like a layperson or a business owner or a supervisor. Try not to be a clinician when you study org psych, and be familiar with the theories of motivation and the theories of career development. Those are important. I also want to make sure that you are familiar with the difference between, for instance, coaching, which is what I do with my customers, and mentoring, which you might do with your children. Think about the differences between coaching and mentoring. If you came and worked at my old brands, remember I was the president of what were the two largest brands for the EPPP for decades. We had hundreds of employees over the years, and we obviously train an employee. We give them milestones, goals, things that they need to achieve. They get through probation, and then they continue to work. We don't get involved with their personal business. But when it comes to mentoring, if you have a son or a daughter, obviously you're a mentor to them as much as a parent. So as a result, you take a more broad interest in them. It goes beyond doing a job, which is coaching. I also wrote down something else. Excuse me, I'm fighting a bug here. Kleinfelter, Turner, Rett syndrome. Make sure you know what they are. And remember what Diane always said. Remember Calvin Klein, Kleinfelter, usually affects boys. Turner, because of our generation, I suppose my generation. Tina Turner, females, affects women, girls. And then Rett syndrome. These are just some of the disorders you need to be familiar with. And remember, there is correlation between physio, the biological, the genetic, and lifespan. Most applicants don't struggle with the environmental lifespan questions. In fact, my reading of this stuff, which started decades ago, it sort of makes sense. The way, for instance, a new stepfather can relate or relates with a stepson versus a stepdaughter. And the relationship between a stepmother and a stepdaughter and stepson, and the differences. Those are environmental issues. Make sure you are familiar with those, but I suspect that you're going to get those. Now, I want to talk about one thing, and I know this can sound somewhat controversial to a few of you. In 35 years of doing this, so I've been doing the EPPP longer than most people have thought about wanting to be a licensed psychologist. Over the years, I know that people form study groups. I want to spend just a few minutes about study groups. I know of groups that meet weekly. I know about one group, for instance, that meets daily. I think meeting daily is illogical because I don't know what you think you're going to accomplish on a daily basis, particularly if all the members of the group are retakes. An effective study group is where, let's pretend, if I think back when I was in law school, maybe my specialty was contract law or constitutional law. Let's say it was con law. And Ethan, maybe his was torts. So we're all studying, but I am the group member who's going to make sure I develop the best notes on, say, clinical. And while Ethan is also studying clinical, he will get a copy of my notes, and he's also mastering physio for the rest of the group. So we're all going to study, but one of us will be the point person for a domain. The reason why I want to share this with you is from time to time, I've been invited to join study groups. I often recognize some of the people in these groups. And honestly, I don't know that they can be very effective. You can meet all you want, as many hours a day, but you would have been much better off studying by reading to learn, reading the content in Diane's summaries, rather than going onto a Zoom call with a bunch of other people who have the same problems you have. See, sometimes you can't help each other unless there's someone in that group that has an expertise in a particular area. And I've always made myself available to visit with study groups. And I can see there's certain members of a group that strike me as that should be your point person for ethics. That should be your point person for psychopathology. Some of these groups, members have shared with me privately that they sort of feel like it's become a waste of time because they're all feeling sorry for each other. They're using each other as a crutch. And unless something good comes out of it, for instance, all these people that talk about, well, gee, I saw the same question. No, you didn't. Your perception of what a question is asking will be different than the person next to you on your left and different than the person on your right. I feel very strongly about this because this exam is like an auto accident. And the people that you talk to did not see the same questions because they didn't have the same questions as you might have had. There are numerous versions that are rotated in and rotated out every 6 to 8 months by the ASPPB. Right now, I know since January where the emphasis seems to be in some of the domains. I know that later in the fall, it's going to shift back to the emphasis that we saw before. For instance, remember I mentioned earlier about CBT and I mentioned something about cross-cultural? Well, what if I told you that I have talked to people who volunteered, because I never asked them, they tell me, Scott, in 2020, I had hardly any CBT questions, but I had a lot of brief therapy and psychodynamic and humanistic questions. Flash forward to, say, 2021. Now they're telling me I had hardly any brief therapy, hardly any psychodynamic, but boy, a lot of cross-cultural compared to last year. Well, again, perception can vary, but I have it pretty much, I think I know, because after decades of doing this, I know they're going to rotate out. Think about, why are you limited to taking the exam only so many times per year? Now, I just talked to someone the other day who's failed 7 times and is now working with me. I just talked to someone also this week who failed 11 times. That's why I'm doing my workshop on the 15th about rebuilding self-confidence, which is open to anybody, whether you're a first time or retake, but it really is for retakes. And don't attend unless you plan on turning on your camera and sharing your story. We're not going to have a woe is me session. We're going to talk about how I can help you and you can help each other start to believe in yourself again and get over this business about the exam defining you when in fact it does not. So as far as study groups, ask yourself, Would you let a blind person drive your children to school? If you're in a room with a bunch of people, how are they contributing to your learning? People tell me, oh, but I've been studying. Okay, great. What have you been studying? Clinical, good. So tell me what the first stage of something is. And my colleague Ethan sends questions to people who say, oh, I just finished clinical. He sends them 5 or 10 questions. They can't answer them. So that means they read, but I don't think anything stuck. You have to believe me when I tell you, for all the money that you have spent on your education, if you shortchange yourself and don't treat this like an academic exercise, it's not going to work. You will not pass. So surround yourself with people that say, we need to learn and master this stuff. You don't need fancy charts. You don't need tons of spreadsheets. You just need to believe in yourself and look at your calendar and say, Monday through Friday, I'm going to dedicate 45 minutes to reading or watching Diane's lectures. On weekends, I will study in 45-minute segments with a 15 to 20-minute break, and then I'm going to come back. Because when you were in school, classes were 50 minutes, and then you had to walk to your next class. Well, this is school. This is an academic. This is the most important and serious thing you're ever going to do next to buying a house or having a child. Because if you can't pass this thing, your degree is worthless. And I need you to take this to heart. Too many people I talk to are saying, oh, well, I read it, but I didn't really learn it. And, I've been jumping around. Don't jump from domain to domain because you're bored. Stop. Don't jump. Oh, I think I'll do a little IO because I'm really kind of burnt out on clinical. No, then you just stop and you pick it up in 20 minutes or the next day. Nobody should study under duress, but you do have a date, a goal for yourself to pass this exam. Ethan, you have some questions for me.
So these questions are from new applicants. So
new applicants,
yeah.
Okay.
So Carrie asks, she said she's a new member and she's wondering if you had any advice on how to get started.
The easiest, there's a video in my video library on how to get started, but everybody should take test 4 of ours when you start. You should take it wearing a mask. 1, replicate exam conditions. And if you work with me, I don't want to talk to you if you took it over the course of several days. Study mode, don't use it because it's dumb. I know we created it for a very particular type of client. It doesn't apply to most of you. You do it in exam mode. So she should wear a mask. She sequesters herself, turns off her phone. She needs to tell the kids, everybody, leave me alone. Mommy or daddy's got to have 4 hours and 15 minutes to themselves. Now, they don't normally use up the whole 4 hours and 15 minutes, but the truth is, you got to replicate Pearson conditions. Get up, go to the restroom is fine, but don't press the pause button. You want to get an idea of your baseline scores under exam conditions. And I would also say, Ethan, that with most applicants, whether I work with them or not, everybody, as soon as you're done with test 4, you get 4 sheets of paper. So you can get something like this, okay? Now, this is the best thing next to my brain chart. So I've got 1, 2, 3. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, all right? I might write clinical up here, clinical. And on another sheet of paper, I'm going to write physio. On another sheet of paper, I'm going to write lifespan. And another sheet of paper, I'm going to write psychopathology. Here is where I'm going to list all of the subdomains from the drop-down menus from each of our exams. So in your client's case, Ethan, our client's case, she would take test 4 and she's going to click on the word clinical where her score might show 60%. She's going to write down the names of the subdomains and then she'll put test 4, the date taken, and then the percentages for each of the subdomains. After she does that, she'll watch Diane's lectures for clinical. Then she'll do the same thing. She'll read the summaries, take the quizzes. Remember what I always say, folks, about those quizzes, by the way. If you miss 2 or more quiz questions, do not go to the next summary because you didn't understand what you just read. Makes no sense. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You go back and you figure out why you got those two wrong, probably something very small, but get in the habit of catching yourself. Now, let's pretend that our applicant has now finished clinical and psychopathology. Now they can take maybe test 1. As soon as they're done with test 1, here we go. On our clinical sheet, they're going to write their subdomain scores, test 1, date taken, and they'll put those in the second column. By doing this, you will be able to pinpoint not only strengths and weaknesses, but you're also giving yourself a heads up. Hey, I just finished my second exam. Now I have to do physio and lifespan, Scott says. I now have taken 2 exams and I have 2 sets of scores for numerous subdomains in physio, which I'm about to read. I better take a look at those subdomain scores, because if they are 0 to say 65%, that's too low. I need to be at least at 66, 68, 70 or higher. I looked at some scores the other day. Someone who's been reading for a long time, lots of 50s and 33s. They have no business doing anything except using those subdomain scores and going back. They need to reread some of the stuff they thought they knew. The pull-down menus will make this a more efficient use of your time, because if you're scoring 70% or above on, say, brief therapies on 3 out of 4 tests, you don't need to reread brief therapies. Just look at your errors on that one exam where maybe you had some issues. Don't reread things unless you've got the numbers to justify spending your time. We don't want to drag this out. No brand should hold you hostage by making you feel dumb when you're not. You're smart. But some of this stuff, let's face it, it's out of your wheelhouse. It's new. It's different than what you thought, different what you believed. But you can do this. I mean, I see it happen. Just the other day, I can't say her last name, but I'll call her Veronica. I worked with her. She increased her score by well over 110 points, ended up with a 560. She worked her tail off to get that score, but it worked. And she saw the same questions that many other people in the United States and Canada saw, and she passed. And we have people who pass all the time, but they study to learn, not memorize. Memorization will never work. And Ethan's always been reminding me, if you read learning and memory, maybe you'll find out why memorization only works under certain conditions. This test, you cannot memorize this junk, but you can only learn so much. That's why I want you to study in small sections. Small, short. Listen, I was the king of the workshops, and I used to watch those poor people sitting at those tables, and I thought to myself, they're just taking notes, and they're staring at a teacher for 6 hours with a couple of 15-minute breaks and a lunch break. By day 2, the eyes are glazed over. Please take those breaks. It's just like when you take the exam, by the way. Everybody I work with, I always tell them every 15 questions, 25 questions, we stop. We count to 30, we close our eyes, give ourselves some affirmations. I know that sounds hokey, but some people might think therapy's hokey. You are therapists. Apply your own trained skills to yourself, because you know in your heart that you should be able to pass this. It's not a beast. It's not a monster. It's just a dumb test. Convoluted questions, but you can make 123 to 127 correct and pass in your state. Ethan, next question.
So next question is from Terrence. He asks, how often should he take exams?
You take exams, 1 through 4 are the core exams. And 5, which I will explain later, and 6 I'll explain later. 1 through 4, I've had thousands of people pass the EPPP with just tests 1 through 4. You should not just listen. If you came from one of those brands, and I know several of them, all they do is have you take test after test. Oh, got to get your scores up. Hey, I failed the exam. What do you want me to do? Oh, you got to get your scores up. Got to get your scores up. That's stupid. I mean, that is just plain outright stupidity. There is no logic. Why would you repeat the same tests over and over if we haven't changed our mindset, changed our behavior? it doesn't make sense. It's like the kid that takes the SAT over and over and over. The scores begin to go down. You folks do not deserve to be misled. Stop taking tests because you're going to memorize specific answers to specific questions, and it's death because they aren't going to be worded that way, and you're going to freak out. And like most people, you'll change answers, and then your score really goes south. So I always tell people, one, you do test 4 first, you do clinical psychopathology, then you might take test 1. Then you'll do physio and lifespan, maybe then, or you could do physio and lifespan, and then you could take, say, test 3. Then you might do ethics and org, and then you'll take another of the core exams, like 2. Then you'll go back and retake test 4, and let's see if your scores go up. Now, I'm going to anticipate a question. I see some questions on my screen here. Test 5. We created test 5 because of the testaholics, the ones that we inherit from the other brands, like the lady the other day who took test 3 twice in one day. What do you... I'm just telling you, this is crazy town. These people, I just cannot believe they have degrees. You spread out the tests, please. I don't believe that taking tests does much more than give us an idea of strengths and weaknesses. And that's it. But I'm not going to mislead you. If I have an applicant that's getting over 70% overall on 1, 2, 3, and 4, if they fail, it's because something that they did or did not do. It's not because the content knowledge is clearly there. Think of this. If my tests 1 through 4 are 225 and there's no experimental, you actually more than passed if it were the real EPPP, which has 50 unscored items and 175. And as far as test 5, the hardest and the easiest questions. Why? Because I want to know, do you have practice effect? Have you memorized answers? If I reword a question 3, 4 different ways, will you still get it right? Odds are you don't. High scores in test 5 shows cognitive flexibility. That's a good thing. Scores of 60% or lower, not so good. Need to go back, but not to everything. Use the drop-down menus to be your guide. Now, I know, Ethan, you have questions, but these are my seeing eyeglasses. My exam is on the 23rd. I do not have a name for this person, so I can't give them a free video. That's too bad. My exam is on the 23rd. My scores for clinical physio ethics are above 70. My life and OP are in the 60s. Am I ready? I don't know. You could write Ethan at prepjet.net. He can tell him your name. He'll have your email. He can actually look at your, see, we can access all your activity. We actually know how many minutes you were on a page. See, we don't do that just to protect our copyright, by the way, not meaning to scare everybody, but we got to protect our product, right? But more importantly, when we know and we see that people are struggling, and we also see that they didn't spend much time with, say, brief therapies, and yet their scores are low in brief therapies, we can actually tell to the minute how long they actually read the brief therapy summaries. And we can look at all of your scores, which Ethan will do. So write Ethan at prepjet.net, and he'll tell you, typically, if you're well over 70-something% on exams 1, 2, 3, 4, again, you should have no problem. There's one from Andrew. What is the best sequence to take the practice exams? I like to mix it up. Now, when we launched Prepjet, test 1, I knew that Diane had told us this the year before we launched while we were in the development phase, some 6 years ago. And Diane said, well, there's a group of questions that they've been asking for years. So that was test 1. Retakes tend to do better with test 1. Test 4, like test 3, is based on newer research, and I think that people find those exams more challenging. I prefer going from 4 to 1 to 3 to 2 to mix it up. And Q just wrote, thank you. Q, write this down, Ethan. Quintina, Adolfo. I would love the free video. Well, Ethan will make sure you get one. You can get one. Probably, I would recommend you get the clinical because that's where people struggle, or physio. But Ethan has your name. Also, I know. Thank you, by the way, for your question. And Q, I appreciate that very much. Go ahead, Ethan. Your next one.
Alrighty, the next question is,
Wish could be longer. People have questions.
Ralph asked, how many times should I take the mock exams?
Ralph, calm your jets. Don't take them too much. I'm really sick and tired of talking to these people. Their scores are ridiculously high, but if I get them on the phone, I realize they don't know anything. And that's because they spend too much time. Literally, I had a person just the other day, after they did not pass in April, I told this person to not take tests for a while. Well, that was in April. I never heard from them since. All of a sudden, I hear from them, and they've been reading, but they haven't taken any exams, and their test is next week. So I suggested very strongly that they take a test, which they haven't seen since a year ago. Scores were terrible, which proved the point that while they did all this many, many hours of reading, it wasn't sticking. And that's because they're pushed. They're reading in between this, the kids, the family, the work, the job, the whatever. I'm just saying, no one should have to take any of our exams more than 2 times. The first time to see how you do. The second time to look for growth. I think anything beyond that becomes stupid because honestly, you're just going to be you're memorizing stuff and you're not learning it. And you're going to be like Pavlov's dog. You're going to see a key term. You're going to pick the answer, but you got it right, but not for the right reasons. It's because you recognize something. Do you really think that I'm going to run the risk? And I know the other brands because I ran them for decades. Nobody has the exact wording of the questions. That would be illegal. And we got enough of that nonsense going on. Wait, this guy Andrew asked me also, how do I, forgive me, how do I know if it's time for a break or time to really apply myself? I feel burnt out from this exam. Most people do, especially if you're a retake. I personally think self-care is critical. I think that you should step away. But if you missed, you got a score of like 435. You shouldn't wait. Now, anyone below 400, you need a lot of time to prepare, and you do need a break. But I'm going to say this to the gentleman here who posted this question. If I get a 435 or a 450, I have a lot of knowledge. And I only missed by 10, 12 questions. I am not going to want to wait, but I still have to use the time wisely. And I know if I look at someone's scores, whether it's a 495, meaning they missed by 1, or a 450, they missed by 10 questions. It's not 10 points, it's 10 questions. You know what I would do? I'm going to focus on clinical, psychopathology, physio, and lifespan, and then I'm going to retake the test. You know why? Because you might have made some sloppy mistakes. Maybe you read too fast, like a lot of them do. Folks, we're all taught how to do something correctly. Don't you hate it when the EPPP asks you what is not a symptom of, what is not, and who sees the word not when they're reading fast? They just see schizophrenia. They see symptoms. Oh, I know. These are the symptoms for schizophrenia. This is the answer. Slow down. Comes back to one of my rules. We always read the last 2 sentences where the question mark is before we read the question. Taking a break is fine if you were bloodied. And bloodied means you got under a 400. But those of you that got a 450 or a 420, listen, we can close that gap. You can do this. You just need structure, a little bit of time, and maybe a reality check where I have to tell you the truth. You missed too many clinical questions. You missed too many physio, and you probably don't even know it. And let me tell you, I remember this going back to 1989. People were missing half the clinical questions, and they didn't even know it. They didn't even know it. And that's because they assume they know clinical, and they saw a key term or phrase, and they went ahead and they answered. And it's not until I looked at the bar graphs, I said, well, you didn't know enough because you missed a lot of clinical. I can read the bar graphs. You can't. It's the one thing I do really well next to brushing my teeth. Ethan, we're going to run out of time. Do you have another one?
Yes. So the next question is,
take a break if you feel burnt out, if you feel burnt out, then do the right thing and take that break. But be realistic. You still have knowledge and you don't want to lose it. And this isn't exactly the kind of stuff that most folks consider like Gone with the Wind. It's memorable. I know you have a question, but I need to answer one from Megan Shelp, I believe. Might want to write this down because Megan and Andrew, Megan, you all get a video. And also put down, I believe it's Jean Kimura and Deborah. I know Deborah, Dueck. 5 and 6 are different. 6 are experimental items. You take it in study mode, 15 questions a day, 20 questions a day. I don't think they're scored. I know how they were developed. I cannot go into detail. I can only tell you that when questions appear on the EPPP that you have seen more than once, it's not scored. Test 6 is based on new research. We don't know if it's scored. We will in time. I can tell you something. We were the first brand to address telepsychology. The others were still 3-4 years behind. I don't even know if they're doing it. I don't really care. What I want to say is that there's 2, no more than 3 scored telepsychology questions. Now, we knew in 2011 and 2014 that the APA came out with new guidelines on telephonic therapy. But it's 2 questions, possibly 3 on jurisdictional. It's simple stuff. This is not really heavy duty thinking, okay? If you live in California, technically you cannot help someone in Nevada by phone because they're not in California and you're not licensed in Nevada. I just answered an EPPP question right there. Go ahead.
That's all I had.
All right. Well, we have another question here. It would really help to know how to align my study plan with the exams. For example, test 6 is only at the end of my study plan. Test 6, some people take it, some don't. I just, if I have some time to kill, you know what I do? And I know you're going to hate this. I answer D. I'm not interested in what the answer is right now because I know I'm just going to assume I don't know any of the answers. I'm just going to pick D. You know why? Because Diane wrote longer explanations because this is based on new research and she uses citations, which the others don't. We actually want you to have validated answers. So she'll cite the research that came up with the answer. For instance, there is a question about the various stages of a specific type of family therapy. I happen to believe this is a scored item, but for me to know that would be illegal. I could only tell you if you get a question on your exam about what is the first stage of, say, structural family therapy, then I guess while you're reading clinical, you should make a list of all the therapies and maybe the name of the researcher, like Mnuchin. And if it has more than one stage, which obviously the word stage implies there's more than one, always know the first one because they're never going to ask you what the final stage or the third stage is. Just remember, this is very, very important for you. So test 6 is like, that's a luxury item. You can play with it in between or if you want to break to learn new things. Now, those questions could eventually be scored. And Diane selected those questions because we have a belief that they would make logical fits in the exam. They're not too hard. They're not too difficult. I know I'm supposed to wrap it up at 30 minutes and I'm already 4 minutes too long. So listen, I want to remind all of you I'm doing 2 free workshops this month on strategies where I will be going into more detail about trends on the exam. Diane sends me an update of all the trends. You know, you may not know it, but Diane goes into our summaries almost every month and makes changes based on research and feedback. Dr. Horry, who's been with me since 1994, myself, we both have free workshops open to the public. He does statistics and exam practice. I do test taking strategies. I talk about trends. And then I added a third workshop that I'll be doing on the 15th on rebuilding self-confidence. Because let me tell you something, you're a therapist, you should know this better than anybody. Your self-esteem is on the line. It shouldn't be, but it is. I just want to close by reminding you of this. My life, the lives of many people, have been enhanced as a result of the good work of licensed psychologists. The country, Canada, as well as the United States, we have families in crisis right now. Every single one of us knows someone that's been affected by COVID. And before COVID, it was the economy. And before the economy, it was something else. And we need more people to get licensed. Recently, we ran a special, which we never do, on Labor Day. And I want to say thank you to the many people that trusted us because it tells me something. You know, we already know that our prices are lower than everybody else's significantly. But I think that there's an element of trust here. We know that you trusted us with your money that you worked very hard for. We owe you a lot more than just content. We owe you direction. That's why Ethan took it upon himself in between his other duties to write some of the basic people, send them examples of questions that they should focus on, give them some guidance, the people that I don't have time to talk to. Prepjet is small enough to serve as many people that are out there, but we're large enough to make sure that our content is as fresh as tomorrow's newspaper. And yes, I'm one of the few people left in North America that actually gets a morning paper. I want to thank you for being here with us today. And I want to thank in particular Andrew Norton, Sandiegogal. Thank you. You get a video too. You'll be in touch with Ethan and Deborah. You'll get a video. All of you, Megan, Q, I got your name earlier. So I want to say thank you to all of you. And remember, if you want to have a real heart-to-heart with colleagues and with me about rebuilding your self-confidence, because let me tell you, it is the cancer of this exam. And I really mean this. And Gina Hernandez joined us. I really mean this. I want you to learn to believe in yourself. This exam does not define you. We need to get you licensed in 2021. Don't be afraid of taking this test. If you could spend the money you spent to go to college, don't try to do this on the cheap, but do it right and you'll be in and out in 90 days. And if you have a problem, I got people with PTSD, ADHD, OCD, miscarriages, divorces. I've heard it all. We will help you because that's the kind of company I want to work at. So if I think it's a good company and I've been doing this for a long time, then trust me, because a lot of people have, and I'm grateful for their trust. And I want to thank all of you for your time today. I'm sorry we went over. Hope I don't get yelled at, but I will be back next Friday. Always feel free to write me, scott@prepjet.net, with any ideas, topics that you want to address. And remember, I have workshops coming up. One is on a Sunday, one is on a Wednesday night. You can go to prepjet.net. You'll see a listing of our free workshops. And by the way, we're going to have a new feature for our Plus and Premium people, quiz by domain and quiz by subdomain. This is available exclusively to our Plus and Premium members, which was built by our really terrific IT staff, because we want you to be able to say, brief therapies, I'm struggling with it. I want to just take a test on brief therapies. So we've been working on this for you, and it will be going live soon for members at the Plus and premium level. Until next week at 3:00 Pacific, this is Scott Abels in Los Angeles. Thank you all very much. I hope you all have a pleasant weekend. I will be gone Monday, and I will be checking my emails. And of course, you can also write my colleague Ethan at Ethan, ETHAN, at prepjet.net. Be safe, wear a mask, and I'll talk to you soon.